My hands still shake when I think about that phone call. The one that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, about love, about sacrifice. Mom, never contact me again. I can't stand your presence in my life anymore. Those were Caitlin's exact words. My daughter, my only living child. The girl I'd raised alone in our modest Cleveland home after her father walked out on us when she was just 4 years old. The child I'd worked 2 jobs for, sometimes 3 during the holidays, just to make sure she never felt the sting of going without. I remember standing there in my kitchen, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I must have stayed frozen like that for a solid minute, the dial tone eventually replacing my daughter's cold voice. What did I do wrong? I whispered to no one. It had been 6 months since James's funeral. My son, my beautiful, kind-hearted boy who'd been taken from this world far too soon at only 27, the official report said brake failure, a tragic accident on a rainy night. The grief had nearly consumed me whole. Only the thought of being there for Caitlin and supporting her through the loss of her brother had kept me putting one foot in front of the other each morning. I placed the phone back in its cradle and walked slowly up the stairs to James's old room. I'd been avoiding it since the funeral, but something in Caitlin's tone, something final, made me feel like it was time to face this. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Everything was exactly as he'd left it the last time he stayed over. The navy blue comforter neatly made on his twin bed. The bookshelves lined with his science fiction collection and engineering textbooks. The framed photo of all 3 of us at his college graduation, smiling so wide our faces might crack from happiness. I sat on the edge of his bed, running my hand over the soft fabric of the comforter. I don't understand, Jamie, I whispered, using the nickname only I was allowed to call him. Why would your sister cut me out like this? What's happening to our family? I don't know how long I sat there, lost in memories of bedtime stories and soccer games and science fair projects, of a little boy who grew into a man I was so proud of. My tears fell silently, creating small dark circles on the comfort. That's when I heard them. Voices downstairs. I hadn't heard anyone come in, but my front door was clearly opening and closing. Then laughter. A man's voice, followed by Caitlin's distinctive giggle. She's upstairs crying in James's room again, I heard my daughter say, her voice dripping with contempt. Pathetic. Did you see her face when I told her never to contact me again? God, she actually believed me. More laughter, cruel and cold, echoed up through the heating vent near my feet. Well, you've always been a good actress, babe, a male voice responded. It took me a moment to place it. Nathan, James's best friend since high school, the best man at his wedding 3 years ago. That's why our plan worked so perfect. I held my breath, pressing my ear closer to the vent. I still can't believe how easy it was to mess with his brake lines, Nathan continued, his voice lower now, and everyone just accepted it was an accident. Even the insurance paid out without question. The inheritance should clear next week, Caitlin said. $2 million, all mine. Well, ours now. And to think your brother never suspected a thing about us, Nathan laughed. Even when I was staying at your place almost every night while Emily was working those night shifts at the hospital. Emily, James's wife, my daughter-in-law, who'd been devastated at the funeral, who'd moved back to California to be closer to her parents after losing her husband. Poor Emily, Caitlin said, mocking. She really thought James was her soulmate. If only she knew he was just a stepping stone, a means to an end. My heart pounded so loudly in my chest I was certain they would hear it downstairs. My son hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered by his sister and his best friend. For money. For an affair that had apparently been going on right under all our noses. I wanted to scream, to run downstairs and confront them, to call the police immediately. But something held me back. A cold, calculating voice in my head reminding me that I had no proof. It would be my word against theirs. The grieving mother making wild accusations against her only remaining child. That's when I remembered the camera. 3 months before James died, there had been a series of break-ins in our neighborhood. I'd installed a basic security system with cameras in the common areas of the house living room, kitchen, front and back doors. They recorded to a cloud server. I hadn't checked the footage in months, barely remembered the system was still active. Let's grab what we came for and get out of here, Nathan was saying. I don't want to be here when she comes downstairs. The sooner we cut her out completely, the better. Agreed, Caitlin replied. Once the money clears, we can head to Mexico like we planned. Start fresh, where no one knows us or what we did. I heard them rummaging through drawers in the kitchen. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and quickly opened the security app. I turned the volume all the way down and saw that yes, the system was still recording. There they were, in my kitchen, Caitlin pulling out the envelope where I kept emergency cash while Nathan stood watch. I quickly backed up the current footage, and then, with shaking fingers, began scrolling through the saved archives. How far back did the recordings go? Would there be anything incriminating? The sound of footsteps on the stairs jolted me back to reality. I quickly locked my phone and shoved it into my pocket. I laid back on James's bed and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, grief-stricken, or both. The bedroom door opened slightly. See? Told you. Crying herself to sleep in his room again, Caitlin whispered, "Let's go, before she wakes up." The door closed softly. I remained motionless, listening as they descended the stairs. Heard the front door open and close, and then the sound of a car starting and driving away. Only then did I allow myself to breathe again. Only then did I open my eyes and stare up at the ceiling, a strange calm settling over me despite the horrific revelation. "I'll make this right, Jamie," I whispered to my son's memory. "I promise you, they won't get away with this." I spent the rest of that evening reviewing months of security footage, saving copies to multiple locations. I couldn't bring myself to watch it all in one sitting, hearing them mock James's memory, plan his murder, celebrate their success was too much. But I was methodical, creating a timeline, noting dates and times of the most incriminating conversations. And all the while, I kept thinking about that phone call. Never contact me again. Now I understood why Caitlin wanted me out of the picture. I was the only loose end in their perfect plan. But they had made one critical mistake. They underestimated a mother's love. They underestimated me. As the night deepened, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them immediately. I wouldn't go to the police just yet. No, this required something more deliberate, more strategic. They had taken everything from me, my son, my family, my trust. Now, it was my turn to take everything from them. I would play the part of the devastated mother they expected me to be. I would act as though I believed Caitlin's cruel dismissal. And all the while, I would be building my case, gathering evidence, laying the groundwork for justice. They thought they had one, but they didn't realize that the game had only just begun. I sat in front of my computer screen that night, hands trembling as I accessed the home security system I had installed after those neighborhood break. The irony wasn't lost on my ad, bought those cameras to protect my family from outside threats, never imagining they would capture the enemy within. The security company had set up a cloud storage system that maintained recordings for 3 months. 3 months. Just enough time to capture conversations that had likely been happening right under my nose while I grieved for James. I clicked through the folder, containing kitchen footage, scrolling back to the weeks before James' death. My stomach knotted as I selected a random date 2 weeks before the accident. There they were. Nathan and Caitlin sitting at my kitchen table while I was at work. His hand caressed her cheek in a way that made me sick. This wasn't brotherly affection between in-laws. This was intimacy. "We need to be careful," Caitlin's voice came through the speaker. "James has been asking questions about where I go in the afternoons. He's always been too smart for his own good," Nathan replied, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather rather than his friend who trusted him completely. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, sampling different days. Each clip revealed more of their betrayal. Their affair had been going on for months, perhaps longer. But it was the conversation from 3 days before James' death that made my blood run cold. "He knows something," Caitlin said, pacing the kitchen. "I saw him looking at my phone last night. Did he see the messages?" Nathan asked, suddenly alert. "I don't think so, but it's only a matter of time. You know James, once he gets suspicious, he doesn't let go." Nathan's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Then we need to move up our timeline." "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean, Kate. We've talked about this. The insurance policy, the house, it all goes to you if something happens to him. My son's own wife nodded slowly. But it has to look like an accident. Leave that to me. His car will be in my shop tomorrow for that oil change he's scheduled. It's the perfect opportunity. I slammed the laptop shut, rushing to the bathroom where I vomited until there was nothing left. My son's killers had plotted his murder in my own kitchen, while I baked cookies and prepared Sunday dinners for them. They were planning to orphan my grandson and take my son's life for money. Money. The word echoed in my mind as I splashed cold water on my face. The insurance policy they mentioned was substantial. James had always been responsible that way, wanting to make sure his family would be taken care of. $1 million to be exact. He had shown me the paperwork when he signed it, proud that he could provide such security. And little Sophie, my 5-year-old granddaughter, who now stayed with her mother's sister while Caitlin was supposedly too grief-stricken to care for her. Another lie. How many times had I offered to take Sophie to give Caitlin space to heal? Each time she'd refused, claiming Sophie was better off with her aunt. I returned to my computer, methodically downloading every piece of incriminating footage, saving multiple copies to different drives. Then I continued watching, moving forward chronologically. After James' death, they'd been careful, meeting less frequently at my house. But their arrogance grew with each passing week. They believed themselves untouchable, their perfect crime undetected. When will the insurance money come through? Nathan asked, in a clip from 2 weeks after the funeral. The agent said it could take up to 6 months for the full amount, but we'll get an advance payment soon. And your mother? What are we going to do about her? Caitlin sighed, annoyed. She's becoming a problem. Always calling, always wanting to see Sophie, asking questions about the accident report. We need to cut her off completely, Nathan said decisively. Make a clean break. Once we get the money, we can move away Florida, maybe, or California. Somewhere she won't find us. She'll never give up on Sophie. You know how she is with her family, is everything nonsense. Nathan's smile chilled me to the bone. We'll figure something out. There are ways to get full custody, make her look unfit to even visit. That explained yesterday's call. They were executing their plan, isolating me not just from Caitlin, but from my granddaughter too. I spent the entire night reviewing footage, making notes, organizing evidence. By dawn, I had compiled enough to put them both behind bars. But prison seemed too simple a punishment for what they had done. As the first light of morning filtered through my windows, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the very kitchen table where they had plotted my son's murder. A strange calm had settled over me. The initial shock and rage had crystallized into something harder, colder, more focused. They thought they were clever. They thought I was just a grieving mother, too blinded by pain to see the truth. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Before raising my children alone, I had been a legal secretary for 20 years. I knew how the system worked. I understood evidence, procedure, the importance of doing things by the book. Most importantly, I had friends in places that could help me. I picked up my phone and called Robert Miller, a detective who had worked with my former law firm. We'd kept in touch over the years, exchanging Christmas cards and occasional lunch dates that never quite developed into anything more. Elizabeth, it's been a while. How are you holding up? His voice was warm with concern. Not well, Robert. I need to see you. It's about James' death. I have reason to believe it wasn't an accident. A pause on the line. That's a serious claim, Liz. What evidence do you have? Enough to make you want to reopen the case. But I need to do this carefully. They can't know I suspect anything. They? Who are you talking about? Caitlin and Nathan? My daughter and her husband. I have them on video discussing how they tampered with James' car. His sharp intake of breath told me he understood the gravity of my accusation. Don't do anything, Liz. Don't confront them. I'll come to you. Give me an hour. After hanging up, I walked to James' room and sat on his bed. I picked up the framed photo on his nightstand, James holding baby Sophie, his face alight with the wonder of new fatherhood. I'll get justice for you, I whispered to his smiling image. And I'll make sure Sophie knows who her father really was. Robert arrived as promised, and I showed him the videos. His professional demeanor cracked as he watched Nathan calmly discussing how he'd sabotaged my son's brakes. This is overwhelming evidence. Liz, we can arrest them today. I shook my head. Not yet. What do you mean? Not yet. They killed your son. And I want them to pay fully for what they've done. If you arrest them now, they'll hire lawyers. They'll deny everything. They might even claim the videos were doctored. So, what do you suggest? Robert asked, studying my face. I need time to gather more evidence. Financial records showing motive. I need to find out what they've done with the insurance money. And most importantly, I need to secure Sophie's future. Robert didn't look convinced. This is dangerous, Liz. If they suspect you know something, they won't, I assured him. As far as they're concerned, I'm a heartbroken mother who's been firmly pushed out of their lives. They think they've won. After some persuasion, Robert agreed to give me 2 weeks before making any official moves. He would, however, quietly begin the process of reopening the investigation into James' accident. After he left, I made another call, this time to my old boss, Harold Winter. Though retired now, Harold had been one of the most respected family law attorneys in Cleveland. Elizabeth, my dear, it's been too long. His familiar voice greeted me. Harold, I need your help. It's about my granddaughter. By the end of our conversation, Harold had agreed to represent me pro bono in a custody case if it came to that. More importantly, he promised to connect me with a private investigator who could track the money trail. As I prepared for bed that night, exhausted but resolute, my phone pinged with a text message. It was from Caitlin. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. I may have been too harsh. Maybe we could meet for coffee sometime next week, just to talk. I stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Now they wanted to reel me back in. Perhaps they'd realized cutting me off completely might raise suspicions. Or maybe they needed something from me. Whatever their reason, they had just handed me the perfect opportunity. I would play their game, but by my rules. I'd like that, sweetheart. I typed back, the endearment tasting like ash in my mouth. Just tell me when and where. Setting the phone down, I looked at the wall of family photos I'd once treasured. The smiling faces now seemed like masks, hiding the monstrous truth beneath. I took down Caitlin's wedding portrait, placing it face down in a drawer. In its place, I hung a new frame containing a single photograph, James holding Sophie on the day she was born. They were the real victims here, and for them, I would become someone I never thought possible, a woman capable of orchestrating the perfect revenge. I've always considered myself a terrible actress. James used to tease me about my transparent expressions, saying, Mom, you could never play poker, your face gives everything away. But it's amazing what motivation can do. When I met Caitlin at the little cafe downtown, I delivered the performance of my lifetime. She was already seated when I arrived, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, designer sunglasses perched on her head. The picture of a young widow still maintaining her appearance, despite her grief. My heart hardened at the sight of her checking her phone, probably texting Nathan about our meeting. Mom, she said, standing to air kiss my cheek. I forced myself not to recoil from her touch. Thanks for coming. Of course, sweetheart. I settled into the chair across from her, arranging my features into an expression of maternal concern. Your call the other day? It really upset me. I've been worried about you. She had the decency to look somewhat ashamed, though I now recognized it as another performance. I know, and I'm sorry. I was having a really bad day. Grief does strange things to people. You know, grief. The word hung between us, and I wondered if she had any idea what true grief felt like, the kind that hollowed you out from the inside, that made you wake up gasping for air in the middle of the night because in your dreams your son was still alive. I understand, I lied, reaching across the table to pat her hand. We're all struggling with James' death in our own ways. Her eyes darted away at the mention of his name. Yes, well, that's partly why I wanted to talk to you. I think I've been unfair, keeping Sophie away. She misses her grandmother, so that's what this was about. They needed something from me, perhaps babysitting services while they made their escape plans. I kept my voice steady as I replied, I've missed her terribly. How is she doing? She has nightmares sometimes. Calls out for her daddy. Caitlin's voice cracked with what might have seemed like genuine emotion to anyone who hadn't seen her plotting that very father's death. Poor baby. Children process grief differently than adults. Maybe I could help. I could take her for a weekend, give you some time to yourself. I made sure to sound eager but not desperate. Caitlin nodded, stirring her latte absently. That's what I was thinking. Actually, Nathan and I need to go out of town next weekend. Something came up with the insurance company, just paperwork. Really boring stuff. Would you be able to take her Friday through Sunday? The insurance company, of course. They were probably finalizing the payout, preparing to disappear with my son's blood money. I forced a smile. I'd love nothing more. You know Sophie is always welcome in my home. Great. There's one more thing. She hesitated, and I waited, curious what else they needed from me. We're having a small dinner party this Thursday. Just a few friends. To mark, well, it would have been James' birthday. I nearly choked on my tea. They were hosting a party on my dead son's birthday. The audacity was breathtaking, but I maintained my composure, even as rage boiled beneath my skin. How thoughtful, I managed to say. I'd almost forgotten the date was coming up. Another lie. As if I could forget the day my son was born. We thought it would be nice to remember him together, with people who loved him. Nathan suggested we invite you, for closure. You know, Nathan suggested it. I doubted that very much. More likely, they wanted to observe me, to ensure I remained in the dark about their crime. Or perhaps they needed to present a united family front for their friends, to dispel any potential suspicions. I'd be honored, I said, my voice thick with feigned emotion. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Caitlin replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nathan is handling all the cooking. We chatted for another 20 minutes about inconsequential things: the weather, a new store opening downtown, a movie Caitlin had recently watched. All the while, I marveled at her ability to sit across from me, the mother of the man she had murdered, and make small talk as if nothing were amiss. When we parted, she hugged me, a gesture that once would have warmed my heart, but now made my skin crawl. I'm glad we did this, Mom. Family should stick together, especially during hard times. I returned her hug, whispering, nothing is more important than family, dear, nothing. As I watched her walk away, I pulled out my phone and texted Robert. Thursday night, dinner party at Caitlin and Nathan. They've invited me to celebrate James' birthday. His response came quickly. Perfect opportunity to place the bugs. I'll have everything ready by Wednesday. Next, I called Harold to update him on the development. He was particularly interested in my upcoming weekend with Sophie. This is excellent, Elizabeth, he said. Document everything while she's with you. Take photos, keep notes of anything she says about her home life. It will all help build our case for custody when the time comes. I spent the next few days preparing meticulously. Robert provided me with 3 tiny recording devices, virtually undetectable, that I could place in Caitlin and Nathan's home during the dinner party. Harold's private investigator confirmed that a substantial insurance payment had indeed been deposited into a joint account in Caitlin and Nathan's names 2 days prior. They've already transferred half of it to an offshore account, he told me over the phone. Classic preparation for running. I'd estimate they're planning to leave the country within 2 to 3 weeks. Time was running short. My window for justice was closing, but I needed to play this perfectly. One wrong move, and they might disappear with both my son's money and my granddaughter. On Thursday evening, I dressed carefully for the dinner party. Choosing an outfit James had always complimented, a navy blue dress with a string of pearls he'd given me for Mother's Day years ago. I styled my hair, applied makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights spent reviewing evidence, and spritzed on the perfume James used to say reminded him of his childhood. I arrived at Caitlin and Nathan's suburban home, carrying a bouquet of Leela James's favorite flowers and a bottle of his preferred whiskey. For the toast, I explained when Nathan opened the door. His welcoming smile not quite concealing his discomfort at seeing me. Elizabeth, you look wonderful, he said, embracing me briefly. Come in. Everyone's in the living room. Their home was tastefully decorated, modern and minimalist. Photos of James were prominently displayed for the occasion, a detail that made my blood boil. They were using his memory, his image, as a prop in their charade. The guests included 2 couples I recognized as friends of Caitlin and Nathan, plus James' childhood best friend Michael and his wife. Michael embraced me warmly, genuine grief shadowing his features. It's good to see you, Mrs. Thompson, he said. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Thank you, Michael. And please, after all these years, it's still just Elizabeth. As we chatted, I took the opportunity to excuse myself to use the restroom, strategically placing one of Robert's recording devices beneath the living room sofa on my way. During dinner, I managed to place another in the kitchen while helping Caitlin bring out dessert, and the third in their home office when I claimed to need a quiet moment to collect myself after the emotional toast to James. The entire evening was a masterclass in restraint. I listened to them reminisce about James, sharing stories of his kindness, his humor, his generosity, while knowing they had coldly planned his death in my kitchen. I watched Nathan refill glasses, play the gracious host, and speak movingly about how much he missed his brother-in-law and best friend. I observed Caitlin dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, accepting condolences for her devastating loss. As the night drew to a close, Nathan raised his glass for a final toast. To James, he said, voice thick with manufactured emotion, "Gone far too soon. We miss you every day, brother." The others echoed the sentiment, but I remained silent, meeting Nathan's eyes across the table. Something in my gaze must have unsettled him, because he quickly looked away, clearing his throat uncomfortably. When I left, Caitlin walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming, Mom. It meant a lot to have you here. And we'll see you tomorrow when we drop off Sophie." I hugged her, allowing myself one moment of truth. I would do anything for family, Caitlin, anything at all. I felt her stiffen slightly in my embrace, but her smile never faltered. "I know you would, Mom. That's what makes you special." The next morning, Robert called to confirm that all 3 devices were operational and transmitting clearly. "We've already got some interesting conversations," he said. They talked for quite a while after everyone left last night. And I prompted, heart pounding. "They're definitely planning to leave." Nathan mentioned tickets to Belize, said they're untraceable. They're planning to take Sophie and disappear next Wednesday. 5 days. They were going to vanish with my granddaughter in just 5 days. "There's more," Robert continued. "They specifically discussed you. Nathan was worried about how calm you seemed at dinner. Caitlin assured him you were clueless. Said something about you always being oblivious to what was happening right in front of you." I almost laughed at the irony. Little do they know, Elizabeth Roberts' voice turned serious. "We have enough now. The recordings from your house, their conversations last night, the financial transfers. We could make arrests today." "Not yet," I insisted. "Let me have the weekend with Sophie first. Once she's safely with me, then you can move." Robert sighed. "This is against my better judgment, but I trust you. Be careful." "If they suspect anything, they won't," I assured him. "They think I'm just a grieving old woman." When Caitlin and Nathan dropped Sophie off that afternoon, I was struck by how much she resembled Jane. The same thoughtful brown eyes, the same dimple when she smiled. She ran to me, throwing her small arms around my waist. "Grandma, I missed you so much." I held her tight, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "I missed you too, sweetheart. We're going to have the best weekend ever." Nathan carried in her overnight bag, setting it by the door. "We've packed everything she needs. Call if there are any problems, but we'll be pretty busy all weekend." "Busy planning your escape?" I thought, but merely smiled and nodded. "Sophie will be fine with me. You too enjoy your weekend." As they drove away, Sophie tugged my hand. "Can we bake cookies like we used to with Daddy?" My heart squeezed painfully. "Of course we can, honey, chocolate chip, just the way he liked them." As we measured flour and cracked eggs, Sophie chattered happily about school and friends. Then, unexpectedly, she asked, "Grandma, is Daddy in heaven?" I set down the mixing spoon, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, he's in heaven." She nodded solemnly. "That's what I thought. Mommy doesn't like to talk about him, and when I ask Uncle Nathan about Daddy, he gets all quiet and weird." Uncle Nathan, the man who had killed her father, now playing Daddy himself. I swallowed hard against the surge of rage. "You can always talk to me about your dad, I promise, anytime you want. And I have lots of pictures and videos we can look at together." That night, after reading Sophie 3 bedtime stories and tucking her into bed in the guest room I had prepared especially for her, I sat at my kitchen table with Robert and Harold, finalizing our plan. Monday morning, Robert confirmed, "We'll arrest them both on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, insurance fraud, and whatever else the DA can throw at them." Harold nodded. I've prepared the emergency custody petition. Once they're arrested, we'll file immediately for temporary custody of Sophie to be granted to you. I looked between these two men who had become my unexpected allies in seeking justice. Thank you both. I couldn't have done this alone. You've been remarkably strong through all this, Harold said, patting my hand. James would be proud. As they left, I checked on Sophie once more, watching her peaceful sleep and making a silent vow that she would never again spend a night under the same roof as her father's killers. The weekend passed too quickly, filled with small moments of joy amidst my growing anticipation of Monday's reckoning. We visited the zoo, baked more cookies, watched Sophie's favorite movies, and looked through photo albums where I told her stories about her father that she'd never heard before. Sunday evening arrived all too soon. When Caitlin and Nathan pulled into my driveway, Sophie clung to me. I don't want to go, Grandma. Can't I stay with you? I kissed her forehead, fighting back tears. Not tonight, sweetheart, but we'll see each other again very soon, I promise. If only she knew how soon. If only she knew that tomorrow would change everything. Monday dawned bright and clear. The kind of autumn day James had always loved: crisp air, golden sunlight filtering through red-orange leaves. It seemed fitting that justice would begin on such a day. I rose early, having barely slept, and dressed with particular care. Today would be etched in my memory forever. I wanted to look strong, composed, unbroken, despite everything they had done to me. Robert called at 7:30 a.m. We're set for noon, he said. The warrant has been signed. Are you sure you don't want to be there for the arrests? No, I replied firmly. I have a different plan. After hanging up, I called Caitlin. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep. Mom, is everything okay? Everything's fine, dear, I said, injecting warmth into my voice. I was just wondering if you and Nathan might join me for lunch today. I made too much pot roast yesterday, James' recipe. You know, and I thought it would be nice to share it with you both. A pause on the line. I could practically hear her mind working, calculating whether this was a complication to their plans or an opportunity to maintain their facade of normalcy. What time were you thinking? She finally asked. Around noon. I know it's short notice. Let me check with Nathan. She muffled the phone, but I could still hear her whispered conversation. It's Mom. Wants us for lunch. I know, but it might look suspicious if we say no. Just for an hour. She returned to the call. Noon works for us. Should we bring anything? Just yourselves, I said, echoing her words from our cafe meeting. And your appetites. As soon as we hung up, I called Robert back. Change of plans. They're coming here at noon. I want them arrested in my home. Elizabeth, he began, concern evident in his voice. This is non-negotiable. Robert, I cut him off. I want to see their faces when they realize they've been caught. I want them to know it was me, the grieving old woman they underestimated, who brought them down. He sighed heavily. Fine, we'll have officers positioned around your property. Once we confirm they've both entered the house, we'll move in. The hours until noon crept by with excruciating slowness. I prepared the dining room table meticulously, setting out my best china, the set I'd used for every special family occasion. I placed James' photo at the center of the table, surrounded by fresh flowers. Then I went to my bedroom and removed the laptop containing all the video evidence from its hiding place. At 11:55, I heard a car pull into my driveway. From my window, I watched Nathan and Caitlin emerge, looking relaxed and unsuspecting. They walked up to my front door arm in arm, the picture of a devoted couple, still united in grief. When I opened the door, Caitlin kissed my cheek. Something smells delicious, Mom. James' favorite, I replied, leading them inside. I thought it would be nice to remember him today. Nathan's eyes darted around nervously. Is it just us for lunch? Just family, I confirmed, watching him relax slightly. Please, have a seat in the dining room. I'll bring out the food. They settled at the table while I retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Through the kitchen door, I could see them exchange glances when they noticed James' photo. She's really not letting go, is she? Nathan whispered. Caitlin shook her head slightly. Just get through lunch. 2 more days and we'll never have to deal with her again. I returned carrying a large serving dish, the savory aroma of pot roast filling the room. I hope you're hungry. Starving, Nathan said with forced enthusiasm. We exchanged pleasantries as I served the meal, discussing the weather, Sophie's weekend with me, their fabricated insurance meeting. All the while, I was keenly aware of the officers waiting outside, of Robert's text message that they were in position. When we were halfway through the meal, I set down my fork. Do you remember the last time we had pot roast together? It was the Sunday before James died. The whole family was here. Caitlin shifted uncomfortably. Mom, do we have to talk about this now? It's important to remember the good times, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. James was sitting right where you are now, Nathan. He was so excited about that promotion he'd just received. Nathan forced a sad smile. He deserved it. He worked hard. Yes, he did, I agreed. He always worked hard for his family, for Sophie, for you, Caitlin. I turned my gaze to my daughter. He would have done anything for you. I know, Mom, she said, impatience edging into her voice. That's what makes what you did so unforgivable. The words hung in the air between us. Nathan froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Caitlin's face drained of color. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice suddenly brittle. I rose from my chair and walked to the sideboard where I'd placed my laptop. I'm talking about how the two of you murdered my son. Nathan laughed, the sound hollow and forced. Elizabeth, grief is making you say crazy things. No one murdered James. It was a terrible accident. Stop lying, I said quietly, opening the laptop. I know everything. I have for weeks now. Their expressions shifted from feigned concern to wary calculation. Caitlin reached for her purse. Mom, I think you need help. Maybe we should call Dr. Peterson. The only people who need help are the two of you. I turned the laptop to face them, and they're waiting right outside. I pressed play. The screen showed them sitting in my kitchen 6 months ago, Nathan calmly explaining how he would sabotage James' brakes. The blood drained from both their faces. Nathan lunged forward, slamming the laptop shut. Where did you get this? He hissed. I installed security cameras after those break-ins in the neighborhood. They captured everything: your affair, your plotting, your cold-blooded decision to kill my son for insurance money. Caitlin stood up so quickly, her chair toppled backward. You're bluffing. That video could be anything. The police have copies of everything. They've been monitoring you for weeks. They know about the offshore accounts, the tickets to Belize, your plans to disappear with Sophie on Wednesday. I stepped back, watching realization dawn on their faces. It's over. Nathan's expression darkened. He moved toward me with menace in his eyes. Give me that laptop, Nathan. Don't. Caitlin cried, but he was already lunging for me. I ducked away from him, circling the table. The police are outside. One scream from me, and they'll be in here. She's lying, he snarled, advancing on. She has nothing but some video that could mean anything. I have your confession from Thursday night, I countered. After your guests left the dinner party, you told Caitlin, and I quote, no one will ever connect us to the brake line. I covered my tracks perfectly. The devices I planted in your house transmitted everything. Nathan stopped dead in his tracks. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Caitlin collapsed back into her chair, her face ashen. Mom, please, you don't understand. James was going to leave me. He was going to take Sophie. Another lie, I said coldly. James would never have abandoned his daughter. But even if that were true, it wouldn't justify murder. We can work something out, Nathan said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. The insurance money, you can have it all. Just delete those videos. I looked at him with utter contempt. You think I want blood money? I want justice for my son. I want Sophie away from the people who murdered her father. Caitlin began to cry, loud, theatrical sobs. Mom, think about what this will do to Sophie. She'll lose both her parents. She lost her father because of you, I replied, unmoved by her tears. She deserves to know the truth someday, and she deserves to be raised by someone who actually loves her, not someone who would orphan her for money. I pulled out my phone and sent a simple text to Robert. Now, within seconds, the front door burst open. 4 police officers rushed in, followed by Robert in plain clothes. Nathan Hayes, Caitlin Hayes. You're under arrest for the murder of James Thompson, he announced, his voice official and cold. The officers moved swiftly, securing Nathan first, as he was the greater physical threat. He didn't resist, seeming almost relieved that the charade was finally over. Caitlin, however, fought and screamed as they handcuffed her. "Mom, how could you do this to me? I'm your daughter." I watched impassively as they read them their rights. James was my son. Sophie is my granddaughter. Family means everything. You should have remembered that. As they were led outside, neighbors gathered on the street, watching in stunned silence as the grieving widow and her supportive brother-in-law were placed in separate police cars. Robert stayed behind with me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Elizabeth. It's over." But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. With Nathan and Caitlin in custody, I now had to focus on Sophie. Harold was already at the courthouse, filing for emergency custody. By evening, a social worker would bring her to me, away from her aunt who had been caring for her while Caitlin prepared their escape. I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through these weeks of planning and pretense was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache where my rage had been. "Are you all right?" Robert asked, concern etching his features. "I will be," I said softly. "Once Sophie is here, once I know she's safe." He nodded, understanding. "I'll stay with you until we get word about the custody hearing." "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." As the police cars drove away, carrying my daughter and her lover to face justice for their crimes, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for what could have been, for the family that was now irreparably broken, for James, whose life had been cut short by the people he trusted most. But amid that sadness was a flicker of something else, a fierce determination to create a new beginning for Sophie, to give her the love and security she deserved, to ensure that despite the horrible truth she would someday have to face, she would grow up knowing her father had been a good man who loved her beyond measure. I closed my eyes, picturing James' face. "It's done, my son," I murmured. "Now we can both find some peace." The phone rang, startling me from my reverie. It was Harold, his voice triumphant. "We got it, Elizabeth. Temporary emergency custody granted. Sophie will be with you tonight." Tears sprang to my eyes, not tears of sorrow this time, but of relief, of hope. "Thank you, Harold. When will they bring her?" The social worker is picking her up now. "They should be at your house within the hour." I hung up and turned to Robert, who had been watching me with concern. "Sophie is coming home," I told him, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in months. As we waited for my granddaughter's arrival, I moved through the house, removing the remnants of the interrupted lunch, straightening Sophie's room, preparing to begin our new life together, a life built on truth and justice rather than lies and betrayal. The trap I had set had closed perfectly. And now, from the wreckage of our family's tragedy, something new could grow. The first weeks after the arrests passed in a blur of police interviews, lawyer meetings, and court appearances. Through it all, I focused on creating a stable environment for Sophie, whose world had been turned upside down yet again. She was confused and frightened when the social worker brought her to me that Monday evening. "Where's Mommy?" she had asked, her small face creased with worry. "Aunt Lisa said Mommy had to go away for a while." I had prepared for this moment, consulting with a child psychologist about the best approach. "Sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level, "your mommy and Uncle Nathan have done something wrong, and they need to answer for it. They'll be away for a long time, but you're going to live with me now." "Did they hurt someone?" she asked, showing that intuitive perception that children often possess. My heart clenched. How do you tell a 5-year-old that her mother conspired to kill her father? "Yes, honey. They did something very bad that hurt your daddy." Her eyes widened with understanding beyond her years. "Is that why Daddy had his accident? Did they make his car crash?" I pulled her into a tight embrace, fighting back tears. "We'll talk more about this when you're older. Right now, you just need to know that you're safe, and I love you very, very much." That night, she slept in my bed, her small body curled against mine as if seeking protection from the harsh truths that hovered just beyond her understanding. I lay awake for hours, listening to her soft breathing, marveling at her resilience, even as I grieved for the innocence she had lost. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late October, nearly 2 months after the arrest. During that time, both Caitlin and Nathan remained in custody, denied bail due to the flight risk they presented. The evidence against them was overwhelming: the security footage from my home, the recordings from the devices placed during the dinner party, the financial trail showing the insurance payout and subsequent transfers to offshore accounts. I had expected Caitlin to maintain her innocence, to fight the charges with the same stubborn determination she had shown throughout her life. Instead, she crumbled under questioning, eventually agreeing to testify against Nathan in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harold called me the day she accepted the plea deal. She's claiming Nathan was the mastermind, that she went along out of fear, he explained, his voice heavy with disgust. She's painting herself as another victim. And the prosecutor believes her? I asked, incredulous. No one believes her completely, he assured me. But her testimony strengthens the case against Nathan, and that's what matters most. I was in the courtroom the day Caitlin took the stand. She had lost weight in jail, her designer clothes replaced by a somber navy suit that her lawyer had provided. She kept her eyes downcast, avoiding my gaze as she was sworn in. Her testimony painted a damning picture of Nathan as a manipulative, controlling partner who had seduced her while James was working late, convincing her over time that her marriage was already dead. According to Caitlin, it was Nathan who first suggested that James' death would solve all their problems, freeing her from a loveless marriage and providing financial security through the insurance payout. I never wanted James to die, she claimed, tears streaming down her face. Nathan said he would just hurt him a little, enough to scare him into giving me a divorce. I didn't know he was going to kill him until it was too late. The prosecutor methodically dismantled her story, presenting clip after clip of security footage showing her active participation in planning James' murder. Mrs. Hayes, he said, using her married name with deliberate irony. In this video from September 15th last year, you clearly state, and I quote, "The insurance won't pay out if it looks suspicious. It has to seem like a complete accident." How do you reconcile that statement with your claim that you didn't know your brother-in-law intended to kill your husband? Caitlin's facade cracked. I was scared. Nathan had already started the affair, already compromised me. I thought if I went along with his planning, I could find a way to warn James before anything happened. Yet, you never warned him, the prosecutor pointed out. And after his death, you transferred half the insurance money to an account only you could access. That doesn't sound like the action of an unwilling participant. By the end of her testimony, even her own lawyer looked defeated. The jury's expressions made it clear they weren't buying her version of events. Nathan's defense strategy was different, but equally desperate. His lawyer argued that while the affair was real, the conversations about sabotaging James' car were just dark fantasy talk, bitter jokes that were never meant to be acted upon. According to his testimony, someone else must have tampered with the brakes. Perhaps an enemy from James' work, or a random act of vandalism. The prosecutor demolished this defense by bringing in the mechanic who had examined the car after the accident. He testified that the brake lines had been cut in a very specific way, a method that required professional knowledge of automotive systems, a method that matched perfectly with what Nathan had described in the security footage. Then came the bombshell that no one, not even I, had anticipated. The prosecutor called a new witness, Dr. Meredith Chen, Caitlin's obstetrician. Dr. Chen, when did Mrs. Hayes first confirm her pregnancy with? The prosecutor asked. February 10th of last year, she replied. Approximately 3 weeks before Mr. Thompson's death, a murmur ran through the courtroom. This was news to everyone, including me. And did Mrs. Hayes indicate who the father was? Objection. Caitlin's lawyer jumped to his feet. Patient confidentiality. Mrs. Hayes waived confidentiality when she signed the plea agreement, the prosecutor countered. This goes directly to motive. The judge overruled the objection, and Dr. Chen continued. Mrs. Hayes told me she was uncertain about paternity. She mentioned she had been intimate with both her husband and another man during the conception window. I felt physically ill. My daughter had been pregnant when she helped murder my son. Pregnant with a child who might have been his war, might have been his killer. Did Mrs. Hayes later confirm paternity? The prosecutor asked. Yes. After her husband's death, she requested a prenatal paternity test. The results confirmed that Nathan Hayes was the biological father of her child. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I gripped the bench in front of me, trying to process this new information. Caitlin had been carrying Nathan's child while plotting to kill James. Had that been part of their motivation all along? Was James' fortune not the only thing they coveted? What happened to this pregnancy, Dr. Chen? The prosecutor continued once order was restored. Mrs. Hayes delivered a healthy baby girl on September 28th of last year, 7 months after James' death. 7 months I had known nothing about another grandchild. Is that child in the courtroom today? The prosecutor asked. Dr. Chen scanned the gallery before pointing to a woman in the back row holding an infant. That appears to be the child with her current guardian. All heads turned. I recognized the woman as Caitlin's sister Lisa, the same aunt who had been caring for Sophie. In her arms was a baby. I had never seen a baby with wispy blonde hair and features that resembled both Caitlin and Nathan. Your Honor, the prosecutor addressed the judge. The state submits that this previously undisclosed pregnancy provides additional motive for the defendant. Mr. Thompson would have eventually discovered his wife's infidelity and the paternity of her unborn child. The revelation of this second child, this half-sister to Sophie, that I hadn't known existed, shook me to my core. When court adjourned for the day, I approached Lisa in the hallway. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't meet my eyes. Caitlin made me promise. She said you'd try to take the baby away if you knew. What's her name? I asked, looking at the sleeping infant. Olivia, Lisa replied. She's 7 months old now. I reached out tentatively, brushing a finger against the baby's soft cheek. Another innocent caught in this web of betrayal and deceit. Another child who would grow up shadowed by her parents' crime. She's Sophie's sister, I said softly. Half-sister at least. Lisa nodded, tears filling her eyes. I know, I've been bringing Sophie to see her when I can. They should know each other, don't you think? Despite everything, I thought of Sophie, who had already lost so much. Yes, I agreed. They should know each other. They're family, after all. That night, I sat with Sophie as she played with her dolls, watching her create imaginary scenarios where everyone lived happily together. My mind raced with questions about Olivia. Would Lisa retain custody? Should I fight for this other grandchild as well? What would be best for both girls? The trial continued for another week, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Nathan was convicted on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. Caitlin, despite her plea deal, still received 25 years for her role in James' death. Her testimony had only reduced the charge from first to second-degree murder. As they led her away after sentencing, she finally looked at me. Her eyes held a mixture of defiance and desperation. "Take care of Sophie," she called out. And Olivia too. They shouldn't suffer for what we did. It was the closest thing to remorse I had heard from her since this nightmare began. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, shouting questions about the case, about how it felt to see justice served, about what would happen to the children. Robert helped me navigate through the crowd to a waiting car. "It's over now," he said as we drove away. "You can finally start to heal." But I knew it wasn't that simple. The trial might be over, but the ripples of James' murder would continue to spread through all our lives. Sophie would grow up without her parents. Olivia would never know her father except as a convicted murderer. And I had lost both my son and my daughter, one to death, one to unforgivable betrayal. Yet amid this wreckage, there was still love. There was still Sophie's hand in mine, her trust and resilience lighting the way forward. And now there was Olivia Tuan, another innocent child who deserved a chance at a normal, loving life, despite the circumstances of her birth. That evening, I called Lisa and invited her to bring Olivia for a visit that weekend. It was time for me to meet my second granddaughter properly. Time to begin building whatever new version of family we could salvage from this tragedy. As I tucked Sophie into bed that night, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Grandma, will I ever see Mommy again?" I stroked her hair, searching for the right word. "Someday, when you're older, if you want to. but she has to stay away for a long time because of the bad things she did. Sophie nodded solemnly. I remember Daddy better now, from the pictures you showed me. He was nice. He read me stories. Yes, he was wonderful, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And he loved you more than anything in the world. She was quiet for a moment, processing this in her 5-year-old way. Then she said something that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. I'm glad I have you, Grandma. You're like Daddy. You love me more than anything. I do, I whispered, kissing her forehead. More than anything in this world. As she drifted off to sleep, I thought about the long road ahead, about raising Sophie, about finding a place for Olivia in our lives, about healing from wounds that might never fully close. It wouldn't be easy, but for these children, these innocent survivors of a tragedy, not of their making, I would find the strength. James would have wanted that. And in honoring his memory this way, perhaps I could finally find some measure of peace. Spring came to Cleveland with a gentle persistence, green shoots pushing through soil still half frozen from winter. I found myself spending more time in the garden that James had helped me plant years ago, Sophie at my side with her tiny pink watering can. Grandma, will the sunflowers really grow as tall as the house? She asked, carefully tipping water onto the freshly planted seed. Almost, I promise. Your daddy and I grew some once that were even taller than he was. Taller than Daddy? Her eyes widened with delight at the thought. At 5, nearly 6, Sophie had developed an almost mythical image of James pieced together from photographs, videos, and the stories I told her daily. It had been 9 months since Caitlin and Nathan's trial. 9 months of building a new normal for Sophie and myself. 9 months of twice-monthly visits with Olivia, who was now a chubby-cheeked toddler with Nathan's blue eyes and Caitlin's determined chin. Lisa had retained custody of Olivia, a decision I hadn't contested. At 63, I knew that raising one young child was already stretching my energy and resources. Taking on an infant as well would have been overwhelming. Besides, Lisa was younger, financially stable, and had been Olivia's primary caregiver since birth. Disrupting that attachment would have served no one. Instead, we had worked out an arrangement where the girls could develop a relationship despite the complicated circumstances. Sophie adored her baby sister, showering her with affection during their visits, and proudly assuming the role of big girl who could show Olivia how things worked. Can we call Aunt Lisa? Sophie asked as we finished watering. I made a drawing for Olivia at school yesterday. Let's go inside and do that, I agreed, gathering the gardening tools. Maybe they can come for dinner this weekend. As we headed indoors, I marveled at Sophie's resilience. Children adapt to their realities in ways adults often can't. For her, this patchwork family, her grandmother, raising her half-sister, living with her aunt was simply the way things were. She rarely asked about Caitlin anymore. The initial flood of questions, when is mommy coming home? Why did mommy do a bad thing? Had gradually subsided as she settled into our new routine. She still had nightmares occasionally, waking in tears, calling for her father, but these two had become less frequent. Lisa answered on the second ring. Elizabeth, I was just about to call you. Something in her tone immediately put me on alert. Is everything all right? Olivia's not sick, is she? No, she's fine. Lisa hesitated. It's about Caitlin. She's been asking to see the girls. My hand tightened on the phone. Absolutely not. I told her you'd say that about Sophie. Lisa sighed. But she's still Olivia's mother. The prison has a program for inmates, with infants and toddlers supervised visits in a special room with toys and books. I glanced at Sophie, who was showing no interest in my conversation, already busy with her crayons at the kitchen table. We agreed not to expose the girls to that environment, Lisa. Not until they're much older and can understand the situation. I know, but... Lisa's voice dropped. She's not doing well, Elizabeth. Her appeal was denied last month. 25 years, that's essentially a life sentence at her age. She'll be in her 50s when she gets out. That's not my concern, I said coldly. She made her choices, she's still my sister, Lisa said quietly, and she's still their mother, however terrible she's been. I closed my eyes, willing away the flash of fury that still overcame me whenever I thought about Caitlin's role in James' death. I can't stop you from taking Olivia if you decide to. You have legal custody. But Sophie isn't going, and that's final. After we hung up, I sat at the table with Sophie, helping her with her drawing a lopsided house with 4 figures in front of it. Sophie, Olivia, Lisa, and me, our strange, fractured family. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "would you ever want to visit your mommy? She's in a place far away where people go when they've done wrong things." Sophie considered this with a seriousness that sometimes startled me. Does she miss me? The question caught me off guard. I think she probably does. Yes. Sophie returned to her coloring, pressing down hard with a blue crayon to create the sky. "I don't want to see her," she said finally. "She hurt Daddy. That was mean." I nodded, relieved, but also saddened by the matter-of-fact way she dismissed her mother. No child should have to make such judgment. The next day, Robert called with news that reopened wounds I'd thought were beginning to heal. "There's been a development," he said. "Nathan is offering new information in exchange for transfer to a medium-security facility." "What kind of information?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "He claims the brake tampering wasn't the only attempt on James' life. Apparently, there was an earlier incident, something about tampered medication, that didn't work." I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "What? The DA's office is investigating?" "They found evidence in Nathan's seized computer of research on untraceable poisons that mimic heart attacks. And there's a medical record showing James went to the ER with chest pains about a month before his death." I remembered that night with painful clarity. James had called me from work, frightened by sudden, crushing chest pain. I'd driven him to the emergency room myself, where doctors had run tests but found nothing conclusive. They'd attributed it to stress and possibly acid reflux, prescribing medication and suggesting he cut back on coffee. "He was only 34, I whispered. "Too young for heart problems." "Exactly," Robert said grimly. "Nathan's claiming it was Caitlin's idea, that she put something in James' coffee, but miscalculated the dose." The revelation sent me spiraling back into the darkness I'd been slowly climbing out of. Not one attempt on my son's life, but 2. How much hatred did it take to try repeatedly to kill someone who trusted you, someone who came home to you each night, who parented a child with you, who had promised to love you forever? When Lisa brought Olivia over that weekend, I could barely look at the child, seeing only Nathan's eyes staring back at me. It was irrational. I knew Olivia was innocent, just as Sophie was. But the fresh wound of this new information made it hard to separate my feelings. Lisa noticed. "What's wrong? You seem distant today." After the girls were playing together in the living room, I told her about Nathan's new claims. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her face ashen. I knew they were capable of terrible things, but this didn't try twice. She shook her head in disbelief. "And you think Caitlin was behind the first attempt?" "According to Nathan," I said, "though who knows what's true anymore. He might be lying to get better prison conditions or to shift more blame onto her." Lisa stared down at her coffee. "I've been visiting her, once a month. She asks about Olivia every time, and about Sophie too." "What do you tell her?" I asked, unsure if I wanted to hear the answer. "The truth. That the girls are thriving, that Sophie is in kindergarten now and loves it, that Olivia is starting to form full sentences, that they see each other regularly and have a good relationship." She hesitated. "I also tell her that you're an amazing grandmother to both of them." I looked at her in surprise. "You say that to Caitlin?" She nodded. "It's the truth. Despite everything she did to you, you've never taken it out on Olivia. You've made sure the girls have a relationship. That's remarkable, Elizabeth." Her words gave me pause. Had I really been as generous as she suggested? Or had I simply been doing what was necessary, what was right for the children? "I still can't forgive her," I said quietly. "I don't think I ever will." "No one expects you to," Lisa replied. "What she and Nathan did was unforgivable. But the way you've handled everything since, that's been nothing short of extraordinary." From the living room came the sound of Sophie's laughter, followed by Olivia's delighted baby giggles. Despite everything, those 2 innocent souls had found joy in each other. Over the following weeks, I found myself thinking more about Caitlin, about what Lisa had said regarding her mental state in prison. I didn't care about Caitlin's well-being, couldn't bring myself to care, not after what she'd done. But I did wonder what would happen when the girls were older, when they inevitably had questions about their mother, when they might want to form their own judgment. Would I be standing in the way of something they needed, even if I couldn't understand that need? The decision came to me one night as I looked through old photo albums with Sophie. We had reached pages from before James' death, photos of family gatherings where Caitlin stood beside her brother, both of them smiling, no hint of the betrayal to come. "Mommy looks happy there," Sophie observed, pointing to Caitlin's face. "She was, I think," I said carefully. "That was before things went very wrong." Sophie studied the photo thoughtfully. "Was she always bad?" The question pierced my heart. "No, sweetheart. People aren't all good or all bad. Your mommy made some terrible choices, but there was a time when she was just your daddy's little sister who he loved very much." Sophie nodded, processing this. "Like how sometimes I'm naughty but you still love me." "Something like that," I managed to say, though the comparison made my chest ache. "Though what your mommy did was much, much worse than being naughty." "Maybe she's sorry now," Sophie suggested with the simple logic of childhood. I closed the album, unwilling to continue this line of discussion. But that night, as I lay awake thinking about Sophie's words, I realized I needed to know. Not for Caitlin's sake, but for the girls. Was there any remorse? Any acknowledgement of the devastation she had caused? Or was she still the same manipulative person who had testified at trial, painting herself as a victim? The following morning, I made a call I never thought I would make. I arranged to visit Caitlin in prison, alone, without the children. The Ohio Reformatory for Women was a stark complex of buildings, surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. As I passed through security checkpoints and metal detectors, I questioned my decision repeatedly. What good could possibly come from seeing Caitlin face to face? The visiting room was large and impersonal, with small tables arranged in rows. Inmates and visitors sat across from each other, allowed limited physical contact under the watchful eyes of guards. When Caitlin was let in, I almost didn't recognize her. The stylish daughter I had known was gone, replaced by a thin woman in a drab uniform, her once perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She had aged decades in less than a year. She sat across from me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Mom, I didn't believe them when they said you were here." I didn't return her greeting. "I came to ask you one thing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Are you sorry for what you did to James?" "Truly sorry." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Every day," she whispered, "every minute. Because you got caught. Or because you killed your brother." Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I destroyed everything. Because Sophie has to grow up without her father. Because I betrayed the person who always protected me, who would have done anything for me." She wiped at her face with a sleeve. "Because I became someone I don't recognize, someone who could do something so unforgivable." I studied her, looking for signs of the manipulation I had seen in court. But there was a rawness to her now that seemed genuine, a haunted quality to her eyes. "Nathan says you tried to poison James before the car accident," I said bluntly. "That it was your idea?" She shook her head vehemently. "No, that was all Nathan. I swear to you, Mom. He put something in James' coffee at work. I didn't know until after, when James went to the hospital." Nathan was angry it hadn't worked. I wasn't sure I believed her, but it didn't really matter anymore. James was gone, and nothing would bring him back. "Sophie asked about you yesterday," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Hope flared in Caitlin's eye. "She did? What did she say?" "She wondered if you were sorry for what you did." Caitlin's face crumpled. "What did you tell her?" I told her I didn't know. I leaned forward slightly. "She's doing well, Caitlin. She's smart, kind, resilient. She and Olivia adore each other. Lisa shows me pictures," she said softly. "They look so happy together. They are..." I stood up, having heard what I came to hear. "I won't bring Sophie to see, not until she's much older and can make that decision for herself. But I won't prevent her from knowing about you, either. I'll answer her questions honestly, without intentionally turning her against you." It was the most I could offer, and from Caitlin's expression, it was more than she had expected. "Thank you," she whispered, "for taking care of her, for loving her, for letting her know Olivia." I nodded once, then turned to leave. As I walked away, she called after me. "Mom, I am sorry. More sorry than I can ever express. Not just for James, but for what I did to you too." I didn't turn back. Her remorse, however genuine, couldn't undo what had been done, but perhaps it could mean something for Sophie and Olivia in the years to come. As I drove home, I felt a subtle shift within Minot's forgiveness. Never that, but a loosening of the knot of hatred I had carried since discovering Caitlin's betrayal. In its place was a weary acceptance of what could not be changed, and a renewed commitment to what could, giving Sophie and Olivia the best possible future, despite the shadows of the past. 5 years passed in the rhythm of ordinary life: school drop-off, doctor appointments, soccer practices, birthday parties. Sophie grew from a kindergartner into a poised, thoughtful 10-year-old with James' analytical mind and quiet determination. Olivia, now 6, bloomed into a spirited child with a contagious laugh and boundless energy. Our arrangement with Lisa had evolved over time. What began as carefully scheduled visits between the sisters had transformed into a fluid, extended family system. The girls spent weekends at each other's homes, celebrated holidays together, and even attended the same elementary school, though in different grades. To the outside world, we probably looked like a perfectly normal blended family: 2 grandmothers raising their granddaughters together after some unspecified family tragedy. Few knew the true story behind our unusual arrangement, and we preferred it that way. The girls deserved protection from the whispers and stares that would inevitably follow if the truth were widely known. It was Sophie who first broached the subject of visiting Caitlin in prison. We were in the car, driving home from her piano lesson, when she suddenly asked, "Grandma, do you think I could see my mom sometime, just to talk to her?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, though I'd been half expecting this question for years. "Why are you thinking about that now, sweetheart?" She gazed out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "We're learning about forgiveness in Sunday school. The teacher said even really bad things can be forgiven if people are truly sorry." She turned to look at me. "Is my mom sorry for what she did to Dad?" I chose my words carefully, remembering my promise to be honest without bias. "She told me she was when I visited her a few years ago. But only you can decide if that's enough for you, Sophie. And you don't have to decide now or even anytime soon. Does Olivia know about what happened to my dad?" "Not the details," I said. "She knows her parents did something wrong and had to go to prison. Lisa and I agreed we'd tell her more when she's older, like you." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'd like to see Mom. Not right away, but maybe soon. Is that okay?" "If that's what you want, then yes, we can arrange it," I assured her. Though the thought of Sophie facing Caitlin filled me with apprehension. "But I want you to talk to Dr. Reynolds about it first." Dr. Reynolds was Sophie's therapist, whom she'd been seeing since shortly after Caitlin's arrest. "I will," she promised, and then changed the subject to her upcoming science project. Seemingly relieved to have made her request that night after Sophie was asleep, I called Lisa to discuss this new development. "She was bound to ask eventually," Lisa said. "She's growing up, trying to make sense of her history." "I know," I sighed. "I just worry about her being disappointed or hurt. Caitlin may say all the right things, but she's still the person who helped kill Sophie's father." "True," Lisa acknowledged. "But denying Sophie this opportunity might cause its own kind of damage. She needs to form her own understanding of who her mother is, not just rely on what we've told her." She was right, of course. Despite my protective instincts, I couldn't shield Sophie from this reality forever. And perhaps seeing Caitlin in person in prison, stripped of her former glamour and freedom, would help Sophie process the gravity of what her mother had done in a way that our explanations never could. After several sessions discussing the potential visit with Dr. Reynolds, who believed Sophie was emotionally prepared, we scheduled the visit for a Saturday in April. I would accompany Sophie but give her private time with Caitlin if she wanted it. As the day approached, Sophie grew increasingly quiet, spending long periods looking at old family photos and videos. The night before the visit, I found her sitting on her bed, clutching the teddy bear James had given her for her 3rd birthday. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked, sitting beside her. "We can cancel if you're not ready." She shook her head firmly. "I need to see her, Grandma. I have questions that only she can answer." "What kind of questions, sweetheart?" Sophie's eyes, so like her father's, met mine steadily. I want to know why. Why she chose Uncle Nathan over Dad. Why money was more important than our family. My heart ached for her. These were questions I had asked myself countless times. Questions that perhaps had no satisfying answer. But Sophie deserved the chance to ask them. Just remember, I said, stroking her hair, your mother's choices don't define you. Nothing she says or does changes who you are or how much you are loved. The prison looked exactly as it had 5 years earlier. Cold, institutional, forbidding. Sophie walked beside me through the security checkpoints, her back straight, her expression composed. Only the tight grip of her hand in mine revealed her nervousness. The visiting room was half full that day. As we waited, Sophie whispered, "Will she look different?" "Yes," I told her honestly. Prison changes people on the outside and inside. When Caitlin was let in, I felt Sophie stiffen beside me. Her mother had indeed changed dramatically since Sophie had last seen her. The fashionable clothes and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by the standard prison uniform. Her hair, once expensively highlighted, was now its natural brown, streaked with premature gray. But the most profound change was in her eyes. The calculating gleam I remembered had been replaced by a weary sadness. She stopped a few feet from our table, uncertainty written across her face. "Sophie," she breathed, her voice catching. "You've grown so much." Sophie stood, her hand slipping from mine. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice small but steady. Caitlin took a tentative step forward, arms half raised, as if unsure whether to attempt a hug. Sophie remained still, neither advancing nor retreating. And after an awkward moment, Caitlin lowered her arms and sat down across from us. "Thank you for coming," she said, her eyes darting between Sophie and me. "Both of you. I know this can't be easy." Sophie sat back down next to me, her posture rigid. "Grandma said I could talk to you alone if I wanted to, but I'd like her to stay. Is that okay?" Relief and disappointment battled briefly in Caitlin's expression. "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable." An uncomfortable silence fell. I had promised myself I would let Sophie lead this conversation, that I wouldn't intervene unless absolutely necessary. She had prepared for this moment with Dr. Reynolds, rehearsing what she wanted to say and ask. "I have some questions," Sophie finally said, her voice stronger now, "and I want you to tell me the truth. Not what you think I want to hear, or what makes you look better, the real truth." Caitlin nodded, visibly swallowing. "I'll try, Sophie, I promise. Did you ever love Dad?" Sophie asked, the directness of the question catching both Caitlin and me by surprise. Caitlin's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, when we first married, I loved him very much. He was kind and smart and so excited about our future together. When you were born, he was the happiest person I'd ever seen." "Then why did you hurt him?" Sophie's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "Why did you choose Uncle Nathan?" Caitlin looked down at her hands, twisted together on the table. "There's no good answer to that, Sophie. I made terrible choices, one after another. I was selfish and greedy and weak. Nathan made me feel special, made big promises about the life we could have together. I let myself believe that I deserved more than what I had with your father. But we were happy," Sophie insisted. "I remember being happy. Dad was always smiling. We were," Caitlin agreed quietly. "Your dad was a wonderful man who loved us both completely. The problem was never him, it was me. I wasn't content with what we had. I wanted more money, more excitement, more attention." "So you killed him?" Sophie's bluntness made me wince, but she needed to say the words, to name the crime directly. Caitlin flinched. "Yes, Nathan and we planned it, and then we carried out that plan. It was the worst thing I've ever done, the thing I regret most in the world." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't bring your dad back or make up for what I took from, but I am sorry, Sophie, more sorry than I can ever express." Sophie was silent for a long moment, studying her mother's face. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't done it? If you had just divorced Dad instead?" "Every day," Caitlin whispered. "I imagine the life we might have had. Your dad would still be alive. You would have split time between our houses, but you would have had both parents who loved you. I wouldn't be in here missing your childhood." Olivia might never have been born, or she might have been born into a different situation. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. I've had 10 years to think about all the better choices I could have made. Olivia asks about you sometimes, Sophie said. She doesn't remember you, but Aunt Lisa shows her pictures. A look of painful longing crossed Caitlin's face. How is she? Lisa brings photos, but it's not the same as hearing about her from someone who really knows her. She's good at gymnastics, Sophie offered, and she likes to draw horses. We share a room when she stays overnight at Grandma's house. For the next 20 minutes, Sophie told Caitlin about her and Olivia's live school, friends, hobbies, the vacations we had taken together. As she spoke, I watched Caitlin drink in every detail, a bittersweet mixture of joy and grief on her face as she glimpsed the lives her children were living without her. Finally, Sophie asked the question I suspected had been her true purpose in coming. Did you know that Uncle Nathan tried to poison Dad before the car accident? Caitlin's eyes widened in shock. What? No. Who told you that? I heard Grandma and Aunt Lisa talking about it once, Sophie admitted. They said Uncle Nathan told the police he put something in Dad's coffee to make him sick. I silently cursed our carelessness. Sophie had obviously overheard a conversation we thought was private. That was all Nathan, Caitlin said vehemently. I didn't know about it until after your dad went to the hospital. Nathan was angry that it hadn't worked. Her eyes sought mine. I swear, Mom, that was not my idea. I was horrified when I found out. Whether this was true or another of Caitlin's manipulations, I couldn't say. But Sophie seemed to accept it, nodding slightly. I thought you should know, she said to me, that I don't hate Mom. I'm really angry and sad about what she did, but I don't hate her. Her maturity took my breath away. At 10 years old, Sophie was displaying a capacity for emotional nuance that many adults never achieve. That's a very big thing to say, I told her. And it's okay if your feelings change over time. You're allowed to feel however you feel about what happened. As our visiting time neared its end, Sophie asked one final question. Will you tell Olivia the truth someday? About why you and her dad are in prison? Caitlin nodded solemnly. When she's old enough to understand. Yes, she deserves the truth, just like you do. When the guard announced that visiting hours were over, Sophie stood and, after a moment's hesitation, stepped forward to give her mother a brief, stiff hug. I might come back sometime, she said. I'm not sure yet. I'll be here, Caitlin replied, her voice breaking. Whenever you want to talk, I'll be here. As we drove home, Sophie stared out the window, lost in thought. Finally, she said, she's different than I remembered. Prison changes people, I said gently, and it's been a long time. She seemed really sorry, Sophie observed. Do you think she is? I considered the question carefully. I think she regrets what she did, yes. Whether that's the same as being truly sorry, feeling remorse, not just for the consequences to herself, but for the harm she caused. Others I don't know. Only she knows what's in her heart. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer. I'm glad we went, but I don't think I want to go again for a while. That's completely fine, I assured her. This is your journey, Sophie. You get to decide the pace. That evening, as I tucked her into bed, she asked, Grandma, do you think Dad would be mad that I went to see Mom today? My throat tightened. No, sweetheart. Your father had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. He would understand that you needed to do this for yourself. He would want you to heal in whatever way works for you. She smiled, reassured. That's what I thought too. Good night, Grandma. I love you. I love you too, more than you can possibly know. As I closed her door, I realized that Sophie's visit to Caitlin had changed something for me as well. The hatred I had carried for so long hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted, making room for something else, not forgiveness, but perhaps a recognition that Caitlin's punishment extended far beyond her prison sentence. She would live the rest of her life knowing what she had done, knowing what she had lost, knowing that her children were growing up without her. And meanwhile, life went on. Sophie and Olivia would continue to grow and thrive. They would face challenges and celebrate triumphs. They would form their own identities, separate from the tragedy that had marked their early years. As for me, I had found purpose in raising these two remarkable girls, in honoring James' memory through my love for his daughter, in creating a family that defied conventional boundaries. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself in my golden years, but it was a life filled with meaning and, increasingly, with joy. Tomorrow would bring school lunches to pack, science projects to supervise, piano practice to oversee. The ordinary rhythms of family life that had once seemed lost forever, the most precious gift of all a future still unfolding one day at a time. 10 years later, I stood in my garden, surveying the riot of spring blooms, daffodils nodding in the breeze, tulips standing at attention, the rose bushes beginning to bud. At 78, I moved more slowly these days, my hands gnarled with arthritis, but I still found peace among the flowers that James and I had planted so many years ago. "Grandma," a voice called from the driveway. "We're here." I turned to see Sophie climbing out of her car, a sleek silver hybrid that had been her college graduation present to herself last year. At 20, she was the image of her father, tall and slender, with James' thoughtful brown eyes and gentle smile. Behind her, Olivia emerged from the passenger side, 16 and radiant, with the particular energy of adolescence. Her blonde hair was currently dyed with streaks of vibrant purple, her latest form of self-expression that Lisa had reluctantly permitted. Right on time for lunch, I called, peeling off my gardening gloves. "Come in, everything's ready." They bounded up the porch steps, each giving me a warm hug. These Sunday lunches had become our tradition over the years, a constant in their busy lives. No matter what else was happening, Sophie's demanding pre-med studies at Case Western, Olivia's packed high school schedule, they always made time for this weekly gathering. "Is Aunt Lisa joining us?" Sophie asked as she helped me set the table. "Not today. She's visiting her son in Columbus, remember? She'll be back tomorrow." Lisa's son from her first marriage had recently made her a grandmother, giving her a new role that she had embraced with characteristic enthusiasm. It had subtly shifted our family dynamics. Lisa now had her own grandchild to dote on, though she remained deeply involved in Olivia's life. As we settled around the table, I studied the girls' faces, marveling at how they had grown into such remarkable young women despite the shadow that had hung over their childhood. Sophie was in her second year of pre-med, determined to become a trauma surgeon. "I want to save people," she had explained when choosing her specialty. "I couldn't save Dad, but I can save someone else's dad." Her quiet determination and academic brilliance had earned her a prestigious scholarship, and her professors already marked her as a rising star. Olivia was still finding her path, but her natural charisma and artistic talent suggested many possibilities. She excelled in drama club and creative writing, winning regional awards for her short stories that often explored themes of family, identity, and belonging. "So," I said as we began our meal, "what's new this week?" Sophie and Olivia exchanged a meaningful glance that immediately put me on alert. "Actually," Sophie began carefully, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." I set down my fork. "That sounds serious. Is everything all right?" "It's about Mom," Olivia said, her voice steady though her fingers fidgeted with her napkin. "She's being released next month. Early parole for good behavior." The news shouldn't have surprised me. Caitlin had been eligible for parole for several years now, but hearing it spoken aloud still sent a jolt through my system. "I see," I managed to say, taking a sip of water to collect myself. "And how do you both feel about that?" Another exchanged glance. They had clearly discussed this extensively before bringing it to me. "I've been visiting her regularly for the past 2 years," Sophie reminded me. After her initial visit at age 10, she had taken a long break before resuming contact with Caitlin during her late teens, a decision she had made thoughtfully with her therapist's guidance. "And I started going with Sophie last year," Olivia added. Though younger, she had been eager to develop her own relationship with the mother she barely remembered. Once she was old enough to understand the full truth of what had happened. "She's changed, Grandma," Sophie said gently. 20 years in prison. It's changed her profoundly. She's not the same person who did those terrible things." I nodded, trying to keep an open mind. "I'm sure that's true. Prison changes everyone. The thing is," Olivia continued, nervousness evident in her voice, "she needs somewhere to live when she gets out, somewhere to start rebuilding her life." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach as I realized where this conversation was heading. "And you want her to stay here? In this house?" "No," Sophie quickly clarified. We would never ask that of you. That wouldn't be fair to anyone. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt at feeling relieved. Aunt Lisa has offered to let her stay in her guest house, Olivia explained. Just until Mom can find a job and get her own place. I nodded slowly. That seems like a reasonable arrangement. Lisa's property included a small guest cottage that she had previously rented out. It would give Caitlin independence while still providing family support. There's more, Sophie said, reaching across the table to take my hand. We'd like to have a family dinner. All of us together. You, me, Olivia, Aunt Lisa, and Mom. Before she moves into the guest house, I stared at her, momentarily speechless. In the 20 years since James' death and Caitlin's imprisonment, I had seen my daughter exactly once during that prison visit to determine if she felt any genuine remorse. I had never imagined sitting across a dinner table from her again, breaking bread as if we were a normal family. I don't know if I can do that, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. After everything, we understand, Olivia said quickly. We really do, Grandma Elizabeth. And if you can't, that's okay. But we think it might help bring some closure, Sophie added gently, for all of us, including you. I looked into their earnest young faces, these remarkable girls, who had survived unimaginable family trauma and somehow emerged compassionate, thoughtful, and wise beyond their years. When you were little, I said slowly, all I wanted was to protect you from pain, to create some semblance of normality, despite what had happened. I wanted you to grow up feeling loved and secure, not defined by your parents' action. And you did that, Sophie assured me, squeezing my hand. You and Aunt Lisa both. You gave us a childhood filled with love. But we're adults now, Olivia added. Or almost, she amended with a small smile. And we need to find our own way forward with Mom. We're not asking you to forgive her or pretend the past didn't happen, just to be present for us. Put that way, how could I refuse? These girls, who had lost so much, were asking so little of me, just my presence at a dinner. Just my willingness to sit in the same room as the daughter who had broken my heart in the most unimaginable way. I'll think about it, I promise. That's the best I can offer right now. They both nodded, understanding the magnitude of even this small concession. Over the following weeks, I wrestled with my decision. Part of me recoiled at the thought of seeing Caitlin again, of hearing her voice, of acknowledging her existence outside the prison walls that had contained her for 2 decades. But another part recognized that my grandchildren needed some form of reconciliation. Not for Caitlin's sake, but for their own. I discussed it with Robert, who had remained a steadfast friend through the years. Occasionally, something more during periods when both of us were ready for companionship. You don't owe Caitlin anything, he reminded me as we walked slowly through the park near my home. Not your forgiveness, not your presence, certainly not your acceptance. I know, I agreed. But this isn't about what I owe Caitlin, it's about what I owe Sophie and Olivia. He nodded thoughtfully. Then, I think you already know what you're going to do. The dinner was scheduled for a Friday evening at Lisa's home, neutral territory for all of us. I arrived early, needing time to compose myself before Caitlin's appearance. Lisa greeted me with a warm hug, her own nervousness evident in the way she fluttered around the kitchen, checking and rechecking dishes that were already perfectly prepared. Are you sure you're ready for this? She asked quietly when the girls had stepped outside to pick fresh flowers for the table. No, I admitted, but I'm here anyway. She squeezed my hand. That counts for a lot, Elizabeth. When the doorbell rang at precisely 6 o'clock, a hush fell over the house. Sophie went to answer it, with Olivia trailing close behind. And then Caitlin was there, standing in Lisa's living room, looking small and uncertain. Prison had aged her beyond her 50 years. Her hair was completely gray now, cut in a practical bob. She wore a simple blouse and slacks that Lisa had purchased for her release. Modest clothing that bore no resemblance to the fashionable attire she had favored in her previous life. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw a flash of the old Caitlin F. fleeting calculation, an assessment of the situation, before it was replaced by something that looked remarkably like humility. Mom, she said softly, thank you for coming. I nodded stiffly, unable to form words just yet. Sophie smoothly guided us all to the dining room, where Lisa had prepared a beautiful meal. As we settled around the table, an awkward silence descended, no one quite sure how to proceed with this strangest of family gathering. It was Olivia who broke the ice, launching into an animated story about her latest school drama production. Sophie joined in, and gradually the conversation found a tentative rhythm, carefully circling around safe topics: the girls' accomplishments, Lisa's new grandson, the unseasonably warm spring weather. Caitlin spoke little, mostly responding to direct questions, her eyes frequently darting to me as if gauging my reaction to her presence. I maintained a polite distance, participating in the conversation but avoiding any direct engagement with my daughter. As Lisa served dessert, James' favorite apple pie, a choice I wasn't sure was thoughtful or painful, Caitlin finally addressed me directly. "Your garden is still beautiful," she said quietly. "I can see it from the street when I walk by. The roses are starting to bloom." I looked at her sharply. "You've been by the house," she flushed. "Just once, the day after I was released. I didn't come close or try to see inside. I just wanted to see the home where my children have been raised, where they've been happy." Before I could respond, Sophie gently placed a small box on the table. "We have something we want to share with everyone," she said. She opened the box to reveal a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a tree. "Olivia and I had these made, one for each of us." She pulled out 4 identical necklaces. "We wanted something to represent our family, complicated and broken in places, but still connected, still standing." She handed one to Lisa, one to me, and after a brief hesitation, one to Caitlin. The 5th she kept for herself. "Our family isn't like other families," Olivia added, her voice steady despite the emotion shining in her eyes. "It was built from tragedy and loss, but it's still ours. And we're grateful for all of you, for the different ways you've loved us and helped us become who we are." As I held the small silver tree in my palm, I felt something shift within me, not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps a recognition that the family these girls needed included all of us, even Caitlin. That the healing they sought required some form of coexistence, however uneasy. "Thank you," I said, slipping the chain around my neck. "It's beautiful." Later, as we prepared to leave, Caitlin approached me in the foyer while the others were still gathering their things. "I know you'll never forgive me," she said softly. "I don't expect you to. What I did was unforgivable." I looked at her steadily. "You're right. I won't forgive you. But I won't stand in the way of Sophie and Olivia having a relationship with you either. They're adults now, capable of making their own choices." She nodded, accepting this. "You raised them beautifully, both of them. Sophie is so much like James's kindness, his intelligence, and you gave Olivia a place in your heart, even though she's your child with Nathan." I finished for her. "She's an innocent. She always was. And she's Sophie's sister. That's all that matters." Caitlin's eyes filled with tears. "I destroyed our family, but you built a new one from the ashes, a better one than I ever created." It wasn't an apology. We were long past the point where apologies held any meaning, but it was an acknowledgement of truth. And perhaps that was the most I could expect, the most any of us could hope for after so much pain and loss. As Sophie drove me home that night, she asked quietly, "Are you okay, Grandma?" I gazed out at the familiar streets of the neighborhood where I had raised my children, where I was now raising their children. "I'm okay," I assured her. "Not happy about the situation, but okay." "That's all we hoped for," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Just okay is enough for now." When we arrived home, I went directly to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept my most precious memento. Among them was the last Father's Day card James had received from Sophie, with her wobbly preschool handwriting, declaring him the best daddy ever. Next to it lay the watch I had given him on our last Christmas together, stopped at the exact moment of the crash that took his life. I touched these treasures gently, then closed the drawer. James was gone, a loss that would never fully heal. But his legacy lived on in his daughter, in the family we had pieced together from tragedy, in the love that had somehow survived the ultimate betrayal. The silver tree pendant caught the light as I prepared for bed. Family, such a simple word for such a complex reality. Mine had been shattered and rebuilt, broken and mended, lost and found again in the most unexpected ways. As I drifted toward sleep, I imagined James watching over us, over Sophie, pursuing her dream of healing others, over Olivia finding her voice through art and storytelling, over me in my careful, tentative coexistence with the daughter who had taken him from us. "We're okay, James," I whispered into the darkness. "Not what we planned, not what we dreamed, but okay. And sometimes that's enough." In the quiet of the night, I could almost hear his response, the gentle reassurance he had always offered in times of doubt. "More than enough, Mom, more than enough."